Every Tuesday, we are going to give you the tips, tricks, and tools you need to confidently solve your clients' health issues and grow your career as a health coach or professional. If you are ready to get started, you're going to want to drop the word test into the comments, and we are going to send you a link for our upcoming webinar, Advancement in Functional Lab Testing for Health Coaches. Don't worry if you can't join us live for the webinar. We will send you a replay. Just make sure to register. I am Piper Gibson. I am your co-host and course counselor, and joining me today is Brandy Buskow, and I probably just butchered that after you told me. She is our course manager. So welcome, Brandy. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Piper. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. So let us get this show on the road. Let's give these health coaches their tips that they need for the week. And this week, we are going to be talking about functional lab coaching for health coaches. So Brandy, tell us what makes FDN different as far as when it comes to the lab testing.
Yeah, so I think the thing that's really nice about FDN is that we do have access to the lab testing. So, a lot of what we do is based on lifestyle. Reed always preaches that lifestyle is very important, and we still do that. But the advantage that we have as FDN practitioners is that we can do some detective work and dig a little bit deeper with lab testing, and we can kind of uncover some areas of dysfunction that you might not be able to recognize just with some lifestyle and symptom questionnaires. The other thing that I think is really good, and I find this with my own clients, is that when you run a lab test and then you sit down and you take the time to explain it to them, they tend to be more compliant because they can see it on paper. And so they're like, whoa, like, okay, this explains how I'm feeling. You're connecting all the dots. I want to follow the recommendations that you're going to give me.
Absolutely. I see that all the time. And I think it's because so many people have been told, oh, everything's normal. It's all in your head. But when we look at it more of a nutritional perspective. We look at it so much differently. That I see that all the time. And I agree, they are so much more compliant when you can sit down with them and explain what's going on in their body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've gotten the comment so many times, almost with every single one of my clients, that they appreciate how we spend an hour with their lab tests, and we sit down and we explain everything that we're seeing, and we correlate it with their health history, their health intake, their symptoms, and we connect the dots that nobody else has been able to connect before. And it makes them feel, like you said, they're not crazy, because that's such a shame. They come to us and they've been to so many other practitioners, and they've tried this supplement and that supplement and this medication and that medication, and nobody's connected the dots for them. And we actually take the time to take a step back and really go slowly with them and meet them where they are. That's the other thing that I think is, as FDNs, we're really good at is, we have all of this knowledge, but if our client isn't ready to do all of the things that we want them to do, we know how to meet them where they are and help them make those gradual steps. And we're still going to get them to the destination that they want to get to.
Absolutely. Hey, Chip, thank you for joining us today. We are talking about functional lab testing for health coaches today. So Brandy, what are some examples of using lab testing to guide our protocols and recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the demographic that I work with a lot of women who are dealing with hormonal issues and fertility issues. And many times they will come to me and they'll say, I have unexplained infertility, and all my labs look normal and I don't understand what's going on. So I'll go through the FDN process with my clients, and we'll look at food sensitivities, and there's almost always food sensitivities that come up. So we start with the diet, DRESS. We start with the diet and we start working on that. And right away, just from that alone, they start to see improvements in their symptoms. Then we will, we'll look at their hormones. And even though the hormones look normal with their doctor, when we start looking at it from the FDN approach, we can start to see, there's some dysfunction there. There's some miscommunication between, the HPA axis. And this could explain why, your fertility is being affected, because there's chaos going on. So I can take that lab work and explain it to them, even though they've been told by their doctor or their endocrinologist or their fertility specialist, well, your labs look normal. We don't understand why you can't get pregnant. And that continues down the road if we keep digging deeper into more tests. And I almost invariably always find some gut infections when we do stool testing. And so we go through the entire process, and we work on the gut, we work on stress, we work on, the communication with the HPA axis, we work on eradicating the gut bugs, and we retest, and everything looks improved, and their fertility gets better. They start to feel better. They start to ovulate again. Their periods start to regulate. And a lot of times they are able to get naturally on their own without intervention. So it can be a really powerful tool, because almost always they come and say, well, my doctor says everything's normal, like there's nothing wrong with me. But we can find those clues with the testing.
That's absolutely right, because I use those investigative tools that you use, and you specialize with women, I specialize in children, but so many similarities there where I'm finding gut dysbiosis, I'm finding gut pathogens, I'm finding mineral imbalances, and definitely food sensitivities that really change a child's behavior and mental health just by doing this investigative work. Whereas previously they're told, you know what, there's nothing you can do about it, they'll grow out of it or they won't grow out of it, here's a pill, or whatever action is going to be taken. So being able to use that lab work and be investigators into people's health really makes a difference for everybody.
It absolutely does. And the approach that you take and that I take the exact same approach with the women I work with as I would with my kids. And that's the nice thing about the way the FDN course is taught, is the same approach can be used for anybody. It doesn't matter what their diagnosis is when they come to us or what their symptoms are. We can use the same approach with everyone, and we can uncover, the metabolic chaos, the dysfunction, and we can help move them towards their health goals.
For sure. Let's see. Chip says most doctors aren't even aware of many lab tests that FDN offers, in my experience. So let's talk about that a little bit, Brandy. What kind of different lab tests do FDN practitioners have access to for their clients? So what's different in our lab testing?
Yeah, so we use functional lab testing. So it's going to be testing that you're not going to necessarily get like a Quest or a LabCorp, or that your doctor's necessarily going to order. And we're going to look at things differently. So your doctor can maybe do stool testing, but when we look at stool testing, it's very different. We're not just looking for, the 10 most common parasites and occult blood. Like, we are doing a comprehensive look at what all is there. We look at some gut health markers. We do intestinal permeability testing. I bet you if you went to your doctor and asked that, they wouldn't even know what that was. They're not thinking about that, where we want to do that because we want to see, is there an issue in the gut with absorption? If you're not absorbing your nutrients, how are you going to have the building blocks you need to have a healthy body? So we look at things very differently. And I have had instances where I've run a stool test and my client has taken it to their doctor, and their doctor's like, well, wow, like I found something like Giardia one time in one of my clients. And she went to her doctor, and he had done a colonoscopy and he had done his test, and it was missed. And the doctor said, wow, like, this is amazing that you actually caught this. And luckily that doctor was open to like working with her and understanding that I was, part of her team. And we work together to eradicate the Giardia. But I see this happening all the time, where, the tests that are being run by doctors aren't the same that we're using, and they're looking at it very differently than we are.
Absolutely. And I tell so many people that we're looking at from an investigative point of view, and we're looking at it more for nutritional status and evaluation than, oh, everything's normal. We're looking at it a much different perspective than you would other practitioners. No one wants to be a Sherlock Holmes. Well, FDNs like to be Sherlock Holmes. We love it, Chip. That's why we do what we do. So Brandy, let's just talk a little bit about FDNs and how we don't focus on the lab testing. The lab testing is great for giving us valuable information, but why do we not focus on the lab testing? Why is that not our main focus?
Yeah, so we talked about why lab testing is so important as part of, what we do as FDNs, but it's also important to know that that's not the only thing. And a lot of times newer practitioners who come out of the course can kind of forget that, and they get really focused on the numbers on the paper, and they want to treat the paper. We don't diagnose or treat, but they want to help their clients based on what the paper is telling them, not remembering that the most basic things that every person needs with lifestyle need to be addressed first. So, you could give them all the supplements in the world, the supplement protocol for a gut pathogen protocol, but if you haven't dealt with the fact that they are not sleeping, it's not going to do anything, or if you haven't dealt with the fact that they're still eating gluten and that they're sensitive to it, or they're eating a ton of sugar, or they're drinking alcohol, or they're not moving. There's so many things that we need to focus on with lifestyle that alone can move somebody pretty far along the track. And I think as FDNs, we get so excited because we have access to the lab work and we want to run all of these tests, which is great, but it can almost overcomplicate things because we forget about the basics. And that's really, really important. And I've done that myself. I've forgotten about the basics and I've wanted to get my clients on a protocol, and then they're not getting where they need to be. And we check in, at the 2 or 3 month mark, and I realized we never addressed sleep. Like, you weren't sleeping, and we didn't address that most fundamental piece that was so important. And if we had just taken the step back and focused on the basics first and got you really comfortable with the diet and the sleeping and the movement and the stress reduction, the rest of the protocol would have been that much more successful.
I agree. I was just speaking to somebody about thyroid earlier and how we use functional lab ranges. So our lab ranges are very narrow compared to what is out there. So taken from people who feel their best. But for example, TSH, maybe it's running a little high on our range, and we're not going to look at it and be like, oh, you have thyroid problems. We're going to look at it and say, okay, your TSH appears to be a little out of balance, but why is it out of balance? How are you sleeping? What are you eating? What kind of supplements are you taking? How stressed are you? Is your boss a jerk and your job is horrible and you're under an extreme amount of stress? So you want to look at all of those factors. Those basics are so important when it comes to helping people heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the other things I think is always missed is the emotional piece. So with FDN, I also am an EFT practitioner. So that really focuses on the emotional piece. And I've also found too that that's a big component, that if you don't address the emotions or the traumas that somebody has, that's a blocking factor for them to move forward. So you're right. Like, we don't look at the paper, like you said, with the TSH, you go, let's give you something to bring that back into balance. Right. We're always asking why. So as Chip said, nobody wants to be a Sherlock Holmes. Well, we do, because we're always asking, well, why? Why are you having this? Why do you have headaches? Why do you have skin issues? Let's keep digging deeper.
Right. And, it's that kind of idea that I may have a headache because I'm gluten sensitive, but you may have a headache because your hormones are out of balance. And so, you can go in and see the same practitioner and they're like, here, take an aspirin. Or you can work with an FDN and really look at the fact that, okay, what can we investigate? How many different ways can you have a headache, and the symptoms, and where do they come from, and where do they stem from?
Yeah, really. And that's the nice thing too, as what we're taught in FDN, is that we have to take that approach. We can't just make the assumption that if somebody comes in with the symptom, Reed famously always says, oh, it's those are thyroid symptoms, there's your problem. Well, not necessarily. For one person that might be it, but those same symptoms might be related to something totally different. And so having that investigative hat on, not being stuck in the diagnosis that your client comes to you with, and kind of thinking big picture and really digging deeper is really, really important with everyone that we work with.
For sure. Back to that emotional piece, I think healing the body and getting healthy in itself is it can be an emotional roller coaster. And, the thing about FDNs is that we're here to hold your hand. As a client, I'm going to hold my client's hand, because when I went through what we went through with my son, there was nobody to hold my hand. There was nobody to walk me through the steps and help me get where I needed to be and to do that investigative work. And so that's an awesome piece of FDN and what we teach, is that we have that, we do that. We're going to hold your hand and get you there.
Absolutely. And I mean, as well as I do, healing is not a linear process. It's not, you start doing things and things are awesome all the time. There's going to be times, and I tell my clients this, you're going to feel great for a little while. And then there might be a week where you feel awful and you think to yourself, why am I even doing this? And that's why it's so important for us to have a call together, because I can remind you that this is part of the process, and I can walk you through how to navigate that. And so that, you're so right, Piper, holding their hand and coaching them along the way, I think is also really valuable for clients.
Absolutely. So are there any takeaways or important things that you want our health coaches to take away from what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to don't overcomplicate things. That's the first thing. We always have a tendency to want to learn so much more, and we need this next course and this next course, and we need all of this information. We need to know everything about every disease. And that's definitely not the case. Let's not overcomplicate things. Focus on the basics. You may think that clients coming to you already know all of the information about food and movement and sleep, but the reality is a lot of them don't. So don't forget that, and don't forget to focus on that in the beginning with your clients, and then you can rely on using the labs to dig deeper and move them further. So remember to stick to the basics, try not to overcomplicate things, and don't think that you have to know everything, because you never will, and that's okay.
And that's absolutely true. Absolutely. Hey, Tisha, thanks for joining us. If you are ready to get some more information, drop the word test into the comments, and we are going to send you a link for our upcoming webinar. It's about advancement in functional lab testing for health coaches. It's going to be super informational. If you cannot join us live, make sure to register anyway. You are going to get a copy of the replay. And, thank you, Brandy, for joining me today and talking to everybody about functional lab testing for health coaches and how we're using it. And I hope everybody has an awesome day, and I hope you guys learned a lot. I know I did. So thank you, Brandy. It was awesome chatting with you today.
Thanks, Piper. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. We will be back. Bye, y'all.